You're cutting the carers.
Deputy,
yes,
it's now 7:30 and we're going on to private members' business. Could I ask you to report progress?
Can I come back at 9?
Could I ask you to report progress?
Well, can
just
I come
move.
back?
Yes, just move.
Can I come back at 9 o'clock?
Just move that you're reporting progress.
Right. Oh yes, reporting progress, and to be continued, Lester.
Yes.
And every deputy here is entitled to have their say on this bill. But we're just after reporting progress. We're in section 1 of this bill. 157 sections. We're halfway through the debate. This is an absolute farce, Minister. And you can call it bombarding or whatever. This is an absolute farce. That we're not going to get past section 2 of this bill. We're not going to deal with the fact that the revenue are going to be given powers. We're not going to deal with the penalties. It's an absolute joke what's going on in this chamber. And I'm calling you, Minister, to not be afraid of debate. Let us get through this section by section. The last bill that you brought before this House was the Credit Union Bill, and we commended you to the hilt in the way that you listened to opposition voices. You may not listen to the opposition voices in this one, but ramming this through like this here is an absolute farce, and there's no progress. We haven't even got to one amendment that hasn't been ruled out because there's not adequate time given.
In fairness to Deputy Halligan, he's the man I'm going to call now to move private members' business, and could I ask him to speak on private members' business?
Thank you, Laskin Corla. I'm sharing with a number of people tonight, as you will probably know. Can I first say that family carers play a vital role in the community, which often goes unrecognised and inadequately supported. They ask for little and they get less in return. These are the people that are responsible for a massive £4.5 billion worth of care each year, which is 5 times the actual cost of the Department of Social Protection and equivalent to 1/3 of the total cost of the HSE. Based on figures from the 2011 census, over 187,000 people in the country identify themselves as carers, with 21% of family carers providing over 43 hours of care per week. Yet, when it comes to official government policy, they are viewed not as a resource, but instead as a cost. And they are treated as little more than modern-day slaves. While the government sits and halves our envelope allowance and gallantly protects senior civil servants and ministerial pensions of over 100,000 a year, some of these people are receiving the equivalent of 1 cent an hour from the state for 24/7 care they are providing. Carers are the only full-time social welfare recipients in the country who are working for their social welfare payments. I would also imagine that they are the only workers in the country who are openly employed in direct contravention to the Organisation and Working Time Act of 1997, which states that the maximum average working week for employees cannot exceed 48 hours. Many of us would know, if we know carers as I do, that many of them go around in a permanent state of exhaustion. I know one carer, I was in a house yesterday, whose day begins at 6 a.m. and ends around 1:30 a.m. She does that 7 days a week on her own, looking after a child who has substantial and hourly needs, without earning the national minimum wage, sick pay, holiday pay, as per the equivalent of a PAYE worker. There is no civilised society in the world where this type of modern-day slave labour should be tolerated. To compound this, the number of people forced into waiting lists for carers allowance has almost tripled since the coalition came to power. The latest figures show that at the start of this month, almost 9,000 people were told to queue for the allowance, compared to 7,765 at the start of the year and 3,769 in the weeks before the election in 2011. The target time for approval is 12 weeks, but the current reality is that it can take, and every one of us is aware of this, anything up to 2 years, often leaving the carer without any alternative source of income. Almost half of those currently waiting have seen their basic weekly allowance delayed for over 6 months, and yet they still continue in their caring role to their loved one while awaiting the decision of the government. It continues to take advantage of this emotional umbilical cord. This kind of knowing exploitation would not be tolerated in any other profession. Overall, family carers receive approximately 800 million from the social protection budget and save the health budget an estimated 4.5 billion annually. Despite this, the average cut in income support is more than twice the average cut in income support to all other recipients of social protection payments at 1.8%. When you make carers less well off, you're not just worsening the life of carers, it impacts on the lives of the sick and the disabled people that they're caring for. How can we as a nation and as a government and as politicians continue to claim that we protect the vulnerable? Following the budget 2 weeks ago, many of us spoke to carers outside Leinster House who were not only angry but also extremely hurt at the savage cut to the respite care grant. A grant which they told us is soon eaten into by the costs associated with, for instance, having a disabled child. This payment was supposed to be in lieu of residential services, to relieve those providing round-the-clock care to local loved ones. In fact, many families ended up using it because the state services to look after their loved ones were totally inadequate, and we all come across that every day of the week. And according to carers groups, if you speak to them, using the money to fund actual physical respite care for your loved one is now a risk of becoming a luxury itself, as more and more people use the grant simply to cope with their day-to-day financial expenses as a carer. And parents of children with autism are paying a hell of a lot more money than is coming in from the government. Many of us know of families, and I know of one particular autistic child in Waterford, where the family reckon they'll be down about 1,500 a year because between the cuts to respite grant, child benefit, and the cuts to the household packet. That's a substantial loss to a carer. And even if the respite grant was affordable, it's not always available. At the same time as the respite grant has been cut, the HSE is engaged in drastic cutbacks to direct respite services throughout the country. Reductions in frontline services have already resulted, most carers will tell you, in a €64 reduction in welfare payment to carers, with 3% of carers stating that the overburden of caring has led to their own physical disability. And many GPs throughout the country can confirm that. All of these against the backdrop of an almost suspension of the housing adaptation grants, and increases in the cost of care in the home are pushing many carers, Minister, right over the edge. And I've come to the conclusion, and I think rightly so, that it is far easier to get €800 from the state for nursing home care than it is to get €100 for a carer in the home. I'm increasingly coming into contact with families left with no choice but to place their loved one in residential care permanently. When home help, daycare, respite services are withdrawn, reduced or sometimes not provided at all, the government needs to clarify home care entitlements immediately without delay. Similarly in the way it has done for statutory provision of the fair deal, and many carers are asking this continually. The high level of care being routinely administered in so many homes brings substantial additional pressures on the household budget in terms of increased energy costs and fuel, and often requires the transfer of patients across care settings, as we're aware of. This adds to transport costs for the carers. There are other costs on top of that kind of come with having a profoundly autistic child, like the cost of cleaning walls. Do we think of that? Repairing and replacing household goods that have been smashed, of regular visits to a doctor for illness or injuries, or self-inflicted or otherwise. Cutting the household package is a poor reflection of a government's appreciation of the role of family carers. Absence within government of any knowledge of the real cost of a disability to inform budget decisions means many families with disabilities are feeling increasingly alienated. You can't imagine it, you can't understand it, and you don't get it if you haven't done it. And these are the words of a carer, which I'll speak about tomorrow night, who said this to me in a house the other day. Not only does the government need to recognise the contribution of carers, but also the knowledge that they hold about their own profession. Carers need to be embraced as a real and equal partners in the provision of care of every level in public service planning and service delivery, which we do not do in this country. From designing a service to individual care planning, care induction training would significantly, for instance, improve the plight of a family expected to cope with the challenge of caring for a loved one at home that is put in place almost immediately if someone has a stroke or somebody has severe difficulties. Repeated studies have highlighted high levels of depression, stress and anxiety amongst the nation's carers, a significant percentage of whom themselves are over 70 years of age. And legislation provided for the phased introduction of GP care is due shortly before the Oireachtas, I believe, with the first phase providing for the extension of GP services to persons with illnesses or disabilities already promised in the budget 2012. I think there's an onus and a responsibility on you, Minister, that full-time carers need to be included in the next rollout. There's a lot more, Minister, I would like to say. I have page upon page I would wish to say, but I would finish by saying this, that carers are human beings who need to be cherished and cared for by the state. No one else can do it for them. No one else can do it for them. They are probably the most highly thought of people in the state and probably the most heroic workers in any service in the state. I would ask you to read this motion that has been put down very carefully and pragmatic. There isn't anything controversial in this motion. We're not asking for all hell to break loose. That would break the budget. I would ask you to read this, show compassion.
Deputy, you should conclude,
I'm going to finish now. And I would urge the government to look behind and beyond political expediency and examine the motion in its own merits. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan, and the Deputy is 4.5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm standing here this evening, but I'm very conscious of those thousands of people in Ireland who are in need of care and are receiving care right at this minute. And that's because of a physical or a mental disability, or perhaps of both, and also perhaps because of age. And I'm also conscious of the thousands of people, the majority of whom who are family members, who are providing that care. And I just wonder if all of those carers said to the HSE, to social protection, to the state, we're not going to provide that care anymore, and what the effect would be on the state. And I actually don't think that the state would be able to deal with that. I think that the needs would be just massive, and there would be an enormous increase in cost to the state. I don't think the state will be able to cope in a way that the care at the moment is dignified for that person in need of care. And it would probably mean a return to the old Dickensian type institution that we are trying to see an end of. And the hospitals already straining, I think, will be severely challenged. So in a very practical and a purely economic sense, the carers are doing the state an enormous service. And I really dread to think, if they weren't doing that service, what the actual costs and the consequences would be. So I want to acknowledge the first point in Deputy Halligan's motion, the vital contribution that carers make, and the saving of the cost, the figures that he has pointed out in that motion. I think he's doing the state and the carers and those receiving care a great service by keeping this topic of care on the agenda. We know what happened in the budget. Yes, okay, the basic allowance was kept, but the respite grant was cut. And that respite grant, in many cases, is not being used for respite, it's being used to provide for basic care. A very close friend of mine is battling motor neuron at the moment. And I know, it's 5 years now, and I know the extent of the care coming from the Motor Neuron Association and also from the local authority. But I know the 24-hour care that she gets from the family member. No amount of money could pay for that service, because the family member carer will do far more in that time than other people would. And you think about the three possible costs: 24-hour nursing care, being in a nursing home, or the care that's provided for the family member. And I know which is the most economical. But then there's also addressing the need of the person with motor neuron who wants to stay at home. They have availed of the grant scheme, which was very positive in adapting the house, and I want to support that part of the motion. I'm conscious of a constituent, an amputee, in a 3-bedroom local authority house, who 2.5 years later is still waiting on the grant for the downstairs extension, which would give her a bedroom and a shower, because her house, being a 3-storey, the stair lift lift is not possible there. Another constituent who has turned down for a carer's allowance for a 96-year-old who wants to stay at home. And I think, again, if that person went into nursing home, what that would mean. Investing in carers, it's investing in community care, which is also investing in our communities to provide dignified and independent living, because that community care is also contributing to social inclusion. We know that the demand for carers and the need for carers is increasing because people are living longer, and people with illnesses because of medical innovation, and children who are born with birth defects are living longer. So there's going to be increasing need for carers. The Hospice Foundation and Alzheimer's Society released a report last Friday. Now, it was mainly dealing with palliative care, but they were looking at the numbers, the increasing numbers of people with Alzheimer's and dementia.
Deputy, you have 1 minute.
Thank you very much. We look at the cut to the respite grant, which will save the government 26 million. And yet 55 million was found for the greyhound and horse racing industry, which I think are pretty lucrative anyway. There are a couple of things that I have been really ashamed of in my short time here, and one was last summer when children with intellectual disabilities, when they reached 18, it appeared that there wasn't going to be services for them. The other was when I joined people in wheelchairs at their all-night protest because their personal assistance hours were being cut, and then to read about the abuse of elderly people in residential care. So I hope that you will publish the standards and new system of inspections for the private and voluntary intellectual disability services sooner rather than later, and also that we will ratify the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, because that would reaffirm the right of people with disabilities to be treated as equals in society, and allied to that is care of the carers.
Thanks, Deputy Joan Collins, and Deputy is 4.5 minutes.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to congratulate Deputy Halligan for putting down this motion and keeping the issue of carers and the users of that care on the agenda. While I was preparing for coming in tonight, it struck me that yesterday, and really showed me the two worlds that we are living in, and the two worlds that this government have allowed to develop over the last period of time, is that the sales of Prada handbags increased by 100% over the past year in a well-known shop in this country. And the reason why I'm raising this, those bags cost €900 each. So there's people in this country that can go into stores in this city and can pay out €900. Chanel business is just escalating through the roof in this shop. Hermes is very strong. The sales of Celine handbags are on fire. And do you know that the lowest price for a Hermes bag is €6,500? €6,500. Do you know the famous Kelly style of a popular seller orders have taken for crocodile bags? They cost between 35,000 and 42,000. And they've run out of bags there in that shop for those items. It's certainly not lone parents buying them. It's certainly not carers buying them. It's certainly not the mothers of children whose child's benefit has been cut. And then we're speaking here and discussing the reality for thousands of people in this country, and that's the reality of trying to protect their means and their supports. 187,000 families provide, we know, an essential service free of charge to the state of nearly 1 million estimated if the state had to provide for this care. It would cost €4 billion if the state was to provide it. The cut in the respite grant, this is yet another mean and unnecessary cut. The Minister of State, Lucinda Creighton, stated yesterday that the budget for the presidency is going to cost €70 million. For the EU presidency next year. If the government were to follow the example of the Danish government, they capped the budget at 35 million. And that would cover the cost of the respite care cut and leave 10 million over. It is another cut that does not make economic sense. If just 280 families decided they couldn't take any more, in providing the care, which would be perfectly understandable, the cost for the state to provide institutional care would be €600 to €1,000 a day. In eliminating, at a stroke, this measure, your cut to the grant, which purports to save 25 million. Respite care is the only payment given to 20,000 full-time carers. A 20% cut is not a modest measure, as Minister Rabbitte says. It's not a very modest proposal. Since the budget of 2009, carers' incomes have been decreased by up to €64 a month. You are carrying on the policy of Fianna Fáil into the policy of this government. 82% of carers have been affected by cutbacks in state services, and there are two other important issues I'd like to raise before I finish. 9,000 carers are on the waiting list for carers allowance. The number has trebled since this government came into power. That number has trebled since you came into power, who you repeatedly claim to protect the vulnerable. 50% are waiting for over 6 months. If an appeal is to take, if they appeal, it could take up to 2 years. The government should agree to the call of the Carers Association for an amnesty, and they should be paid now and then means tested later. The bureaucratic means testing should come later, but they should be paid now in relation to the carers' support. I also fully support the call.
You have 1 minute.
I also fully support the call from the Carers Association for the publication of the National Carers Strategy. It was drawn up by the previous government after widespread consultation, and there is a commitment from the Fine Gael Labour programme for government to provide the National Carers Strategy and to implement the measures necessary in income support, health care, recognition by health professionals, training, access to the labour market and transport and housing. This government have a lot to answer for. You can't keep blaming the finger of Fianna Fáil. They started, you're continuing it. Stop it.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Finney McGrath, and the Deputy is 4.5 minutes.
First of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity of speaking to this very important motion on the vital contribution carers make to the social and economic life of the nation. Some people are under the impression that the debate on the carers, the disabled and our senior citizens and the respite care grant issue is over. Well, it's not. The respite care grant cut is not over, and I will continue to fight and fight and fight until the carers get justice and equality. The respite care grant cut was a national disgrace, and any TD that supported this cut should hang their heads in shame. It was wrong, 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 and no weasel words will not change my mind on this issue. To take this money off these families was mean, stingy and a grave injustice. If we lived in a real democratic and inclusive republic, this cut would not have happened, especially that many independent TDs in the Dáil put forward other funding proposals, and again we heard more tonight. It's also a disgrace and an eternal shame to see the Labour Party, for example, and TDs like Deputy Aodhán Ó Ríordáin and Deputy Sean Kenny actively supporting this cut to the respite care, but also cutting the child benefit to families by €10. There were also more broken promises to the people of the north side of Dublin. They also have the brass neck to say they prevented cuts to education and health. Tell that to the services for the disabled that were cut by 3% last week. Or the money, the 350 profoundly deaf children who are now on waiting lists for life-changing implants, vital to make them hear, or the 12 million education cut to the PLC courses that hit the most disadvantaged. Let them stop spinning in truths and own up to their own cuts and their own false promises. This is gone-bean politics at its worst. Then today we see the government spending €244,741 today on a website for the EU presidency and other expenses, and the total was in the region of €330,194.71. And this would be enough, Minister, to restore a full respite grant to over 1,000 people that are on this list. So don't talk about lack of funds and while you're wasting this money. $244,000 for a website. I think most TDs in this Dáil would know you can get a website between £3 and £4 grand. So it's time for the government and the Minister to get real. In relation to the cut of 3% to frontline services for the disabled, let me say that this will have a devastating effect in 2013. This is the untold story of this budget. What that means on the ground is that, for example, St Michael's House services will be down €5 million in 2013. €5 million in 2013. So, Minister, don't lecture us about protecting the vulnerable. This government turned its back on the vulnerable, and now even the IMF are asking you to ease off. In the last 24 hours, the IMF are saying the same thing. That's the reality on the ground, and that's what this motion is about tonight. The technical group from all different political backgrounds have united in this motion and have stood with the carers in this country, and I think it's important we say that. We also have the scandal last week of one Labour TD, I think it was Deputy Derek Nolan, saying at a parliamentary party meeting that the only people who cared about the carers were the carers themselves down in Galway. That's an appalling statement for any member of any party to say in relation to this broader debate. So can I say, Carla, it's important that these things are out in the public. These people have let down our carers. We also, in the motion tonight, the technical group acknowledges the full-time family carers are expert care partners and as such should be treated with the dignity and respect they deserve. The carers' rights have their own health needs met. And we're also calling on the government to immediately reverse the cut announced in Budget 2013, which will reduce the amount of the respite care grant. We're also asking to make provisions from within the Special Delivery Unit budget allocation to incorporate care induction training and needs assessment prior to patient being discharged. We're also asking to eliminate the current backlog of carers allowances applications by early 2013. So finally, I would urge all deputies to support the carers. I would urge all deputies to support the disabled. I would urge all deputies to support our senior citizen, and above all, I would urge all deputies to support this motion tonight. Thank you, Carla.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Catherine Murphy, and the Deputy's 4.5 minutes.
Thank you, and I'd also like to thank Deputy John Halligan for tabling this private member's motion. I want to focus on the respite care grant. The presentation of it being used for frivolous reasons is so wrong for most people. Both the respite care grant and the domiciliary care payments are often exclusively used to fill gaps for services that should be available and are not. Many services are organised around the institutions rather than around the person requiring care, and you need to know the system to get the services you require. There are vast differences between what might be available, for example, where there's no comparison between, for example, between elder care in, say, for example, West Dublin and North Kildare. I've come across a situation recently where somebody in West Dublin could make a comparison. A pressure mattress was required for somebody that was confined to bed. In West Dublin, it was provided. In North Kildare, in the same broad comparison, they were told to go source it themselves. Your geography very often depends on the services that you get, and the way services are delivered is causing additional problems for those who are caring. They have to become advocates. They have to become organisers around the caring needs of the person they're looking after. Getting somebody, for example, old or sick into hospital has become a new battleground. I was dealing with a case of a 90-year-old man who had post-operative complications. Getting an ambulance for the man was a bigger issue and took a couple of weeks than getting a hospital bed. Now, there's something very wrong in relation to that. His doctor spent something like 3 weeks trying to get him into hospital. The HSE have told me that transport may only provided in the clinician's view. The patient would be unable to make the journey without clinical assistance, or where the patient must be transported by stretcher. That's going to cause really serious problems for particularly very elderly people. I just echo the points that have been made by Deputy Joan Collins in relation to delays in processing carers' claims. They're taking an absolutely ridiculous length of time, and essentially what's happening is people are very often having to decide that they can't be the one that can care for an elderly relative at home. The Carers Association are themselves looking for a GP card for carers, and I think if somebody qualifies for a carers allowance, they should get a GP card. It makes good economic and healthcare sense, because 1/3 of all carers themselves become ill, and to keep them well is really in the interest of the country. I just want to deal with the housing adaptation grants. Local authorities administer this. It depends on the local authority coming up with matching funds. The way the local authority fund has been dispensed, it has been deeply unfair in recent years. And essentially, it's not going to improve with the way this property tax has been talked about.
1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. The great irony is that many counties that fall into what's called a poor area often have more discretionary funding. The qualifying criteria for the home adaptation grant is the amount of matching funds that you can put with the fund that can be drawn down from the department. The needs and resources model is what's used here, and essentially that's based on an assessment that was done around 2000. What you have, you hold, and counties that have been growing in population in recent years are at a huge disadvantage. I just want to finally deal with one particular area where there's going to be increased needs, and those increased caring needs are going to be for families where adult services have been withdrawn, for young people who are finished their schooling. I was contacted by somebody recently who has a son who's autistic, non-verbal and has an intellectual disability. He was told that he'd be put on a list, but there was no guarantee of any services. In actual fact, they were talking about taking away respite services. They were talking about cutting down the day services available, because they're at the point where the services can only be provided for residential places. You know, this is going to, yeah, I just finished. This is going to create new caring needs. It makes no sense. And you're either going to provide money for the carers or you're going to provide the services. But at the moment, neither has been adequately provided for.
Thanks, Deputy Clare Daly, and Deputy 4.5 minutes.
Thanks, Ceann Comhairle. I think there was probably a hope, maybe amongst some of the government backbenchers in general, and probably the Labour Party in particular, that the deed had been done in the Social Welfare Bill last week. He had managed to attack carers, took a bit of flack, one man overboard, but that she emerged relatively unscathed. And I think the purpose of this motion tonight is to basically say that you didn't, and that this issue isn't over and it's not going to be let go of. Because the comments and the insult and hypocrisy of the likes of Deputy Pat Rabbitte, who went on the airwaves and said that it was a choice between cutting the respite grant or cutting the core payments and basic carers allowance, and tried to give the impression that basically after tossing and turning and grappling with your consciences, that you came down on the side, much against your best wishes, of cutting the respite care grant. That is a complete and utter lie. Everybody knows that wasn't the only choice in town. You could have, I will, yeah, and I'll stand over it any time. They could have targeted the wealthy.
Please, Deputy. The Chair.
I'll explain it to you if you don't understand.
The Chair, take your seat. Take your seat. Take your seat. Deputy, I ask you to withdraw the statement lie.
To withdraw the statement lie, yes, that the choice was between a cut in respite grant and a cut in allowance. No, that is a lie. That wasn't the choice. The choice was between targeting the wealthy, the corporations, the perks. I'm talking about the comment being untruthful. Please. That was not. The comment was untruthful.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. This government chose not to tackle the wealthy, the corporations or their own perks, and the idea that she did not tackle a core payment is a disgrace and an insult. This respite grant is the core payment of 20,000 families in this state, and it has been attacked. Their core payment has been eaten into to compensate for the loss of that respite grant, to pay for the extra ESB charges from the cut in units, the extra telephone charges, the extra bus fares, general inflation and so on. And the army of workers, because that's what they are, who care 24/7, 365 days a year in homes and communities, aren't going to let this issue go either, because they can't, and they have really nowhere else to go. And I think the government has made a very serious mistake on this issue. All of us would have met people outside these gates protesting, people who are under acute and intense pressure. I never met so many people in one protest who were, I would call it, on the edge. And I fully believe the surveys which reveal that 38% of carers are completely overwhelmed by the lives they lead and the circumstances they are forced to endure, which has had a massive impact on their health. We met them outside. Many of them said, we'll swap you. Take the respite grant, keep the cut, come down and live my life for 1 day, 2 days, without a break, without any relief and so on. I haven't got time to maybe give the stories, but the illusion that carers are some sort of a modern day Florence Nightingale who work for the love of their relatives or family members, to be honest with you, and that we're supposed to be the great ones who kind of give them a few bob, and aren't they lucky to be getting it? That's a complete and utter wrong way around. Deputy Halligan is correct. This is modern-day slavery. It's a crime that we are sweating off the unpaid labour of hundreds of thousands of citizens in this state. We have saved a fortune off their back. Carers are workers. They should be treated as stuff. We've had people who've given up a lifetime of work because they've come ill. They gave up the job. They looked after a loved one, and now living the lives of paupers. They are entitled to proper wages and conditions. The state benefits to the tune of $4 billion from their work. That is an absolute fact. The government have got it the wrong way around. We're attacking care in the community. You've attacked the home help hours, which gives carers some relief for a couple of hours a day, yet you're even eating into that. You're making carers sicker. You're putting a huge drain on the economy. Carers are not vulnerable. They're not weak. They're workers who are entitled to be treated as workers, to be paid accordingly, and if we did that, we might appreciate them a bit more.
Thanks, Deputy. Deputy Mick Wallace, and the Deputy is 4.5 minutes.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. I would think that when most people thought about the budgets and look back on it, there was a couple of things that really stood out for them, no doubt about it, and they were child benefit and the cut to respite care. And I, for one, was surprised that the government did it, despite all the rumours in the media before that. I didn't actually think that they would do that, because I didn't think it was a good idea for those at the mercy of it or for the government themselves. Now, if you wanted to increase child poverty in this country, you could be proactive about it and actually cut child benefit, because it would be fairly well guaranteed to reap rewards. And that's what will happen with the cut to child benefit. Respite care. I mean, most people find it hard that for the 26 million, it defies logic that the government would actually go down this route. There's been so much talk since I came in here about primary care, and I think it's the right way to go. The whole philosophy of keeping people in their homes is the right way to go. But this flies in the face of that philosophy. And I mean, I wouldn't have met many people that actually had to work as carers in the home before I came in here. And one thing I've been struck by is the fact that they have such an incredibly difficult job. And it is so underrated and unappreciated by people in general, including by myself. And I just think that this cut is actually a bit of an insult to them. I think it makes their job more difficult, because you're not putting the value on what they do. And it's the opposite we should be doing. I, for one, I wouldn't like to be stuck in the working conditions that they are in, irrespective of what you got for it. And I think that it's something that we've got to give credit to people who actually sacrifice such an aspect of their lives to do this, instead of what we're doing. I mean, I met people outside on 2 different evenings, and I was really taken aback at how hurt they are. It isn't just that they're losing money and life is very difficult and this is making it more difficult. They were really hurt that they're not appreciated. The budget did have alternatives. We say we can't touch corporation tax, that it's sacrosanct, that it goes somewhere else. We say that we shouldn't touch the tax relief for the high pensions, that invest it somewhere else. We don't think it's a good idea to tax incomes, put a higher income tax on incomes over 100,000, because, that's not good for long-term jobs and investment and whatever. And we think that this is okay. There's a lack of logic here. You cannot do these things and treat these people like that and cut the child benefit. I mean, poor households are going to have poor children. I mean, do we have a responsibility whether the kids are hungry or not? Do we have a responsibility if they have proper shoes? Do we have a responsibility if their bedroom is damp? Does it matter? Do we have a responsibility in here? If we make conditions so difficult for the household,
You should conclude, please.
are we not responsible in some way for these issues?
Thanks, Deputy Michael Healy-Rae, Deputy's 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Cahill. And at the outset, I'd like to thank Deputy John Halligan for bringing forward this excellent private member's motion, and Deputy Catherine Murphy and the Whip's office for allowing me, and the rest of the group for allowing me some of their speaking time, which I appreciate very much. I want to support this private member's motion because, like other deputies and politicians in general, on a day-to-day basis, I deal with people who are providing excellent care for people in their homes. Nobody can underestimate the value of this work, and I was very grateful, even in recent weeks, to attend in Tralee a briefing session by carers who are providing care for people in their homes. I heard first-hand on that day, as I have outside this house, and at my clinics and at my constituency meetings, I've heard the cases of people going through an awful lot to provide care. But they're not looking for anything special for that. They're doing this work. They want to take care of people in their own homes, but they want basic recognition for it. They want to be treated properly by the state. They do not want to be treated the way they're being treated at present, because people on the other side of that house should know that on a day-to-day basis, there are people giving care for people in their homes, and they're being paid for possibly maybe only half of the work. Because if they go in and if they're taking care of somebody who perhaps is in a wheelchair, and if they have 40 minutes to deal with that person, they're not going to be able to deal with that person's personal needs in that length of time. And if they're going to stay for an hour or an hour and 20 minutes, they're not going to say anything about it. They're just going to do the work and only get paid for half of their work. So they're working for free for at least half of their time. Half of their week is worked for nothing. And I can't get over how people are going to go against this motion and vote against it, because I want to remind the people what Deputy Halligan says at the very beginning, that Dail recognises the vital contribution carers make to the economic and social life of the nation, and further acknowledges this by providing them with adequate income supports. How, in the name of God, could anybody vote against that tonight or tomorrow night or any other night? It's inhuman to do so. And I want the people who are going to vote against it, if they are going to vote against it, explain it at home in your constituencies. Explain how you think that it is right to go against this excellent motion. And thanks again, and thanks to the technical group.
Thanks, Deputy. Minister Kathleen Lynch, and the Minister has 30 minutes.
You're very generous, Chair. Not certain I'll take that much, but I'll do my best. I'm taking the debate tonight on this private member's motion on behalf of the Minister for Social Protection, Joan Burton. The Minister, as the deputies would be aware, has been in the Senate all day, and I was just watching, has just left it recently, so didn't have time. But I'm sure that she'll be taking all of the contributions that have been made on board, and we'll be here to wrap up tomorrow night. Chair, I wish to move amendment number 1 and to delete all words after Dail and substitute the following. Notes that carers make a vital contribution to the economic and social life of the nation. That the income supports which are available to carers from the state are amongst the highest rates of income supports in Europe. That the income disregard and means test for carers allowance is the most generous in the social welfare system. That a person getting certain qualifying payments and also providing full-time care and attention to another person can keep their main social welfare payment and get half-rate carers allowance as well, and these rates were fully protected in Budget 2013.
that carers also receive a free travel pass at an annual cost of €6 million nationally, and carers who reside with the care recipient are eligible for the household benefit package at an annual cost of approximately €30 million, and that carers are entitled to an extra half-rate carers allowance if they care for more than one person, and a respite grant is paid for each of the care recipients. That the respite grant is available to all full-time carers regardless of their means. That the government had to make very difficult decisions in the course of Budget 2013 in order to protect core weekly payments which people receive, such as pensions, disability, job seekers and carers allowances. And that revised rates of the respite grant of €1,375 will still be more than what it was in 2006, at the height of the economic boom, when the rate was €1,200 and more than twice what it was in 2002, when it was set at €635. That the estimated expenditure on carers in 2012 is over...
If you to read in the amendment into the records, if you so wish to go on to your own
If I have a half an hour, Chair, I think we'll go as we're going. Right? That the estimated expenditure on carers in 2012 is over €771 million, €509 million on carers allowance, €24 million on carers benefit, €135 million on the respite care grant and €103 million on domiciliary care allowance, and that this represents an increase of almost €20 million on expenditure of 2011. It welcomes the publication of the National Carers Strategy in 2012, which for the first time at national level recognises the value and contribution of carers to society, and the carers organisations which were present at the launch of that strategy were fully appreciative of that. The roadmap for implementation in that strategy and the commitment to progress these elements of the strategy within the limits of existing resource constraints. The Government plans to reform the current public health care system by introducing universal health insurance with equal access to care for all, and to introduce on a phased basis GP care without fees for the entire population within its first term of office, and acknowledges that additional funding has been provided to meet the needs of people receiving GP care and prescription drugs under a general medical services scheme, which now stands at in excess of 1.8 million medical cards, representing an increase of 24% since the start of 2010. To be expected when you consider that the economy is in such crisis. That approximately 97% of persons over 70 years of age are provided with free GP and hospital services, as well as subsidised prescription drugs subject to a capped fee per item. That stable public finances are an essential prerequisite to long-term economic growth and job creation. That the state will only be able to access the markets successfully in the long term if the markets believe we have a credible fiscal strategy and agree that our debt is sustainable. That this government continues to face a daunting challenge in repairing the economy and the public finances, and that difficult decisions are still required. That the government has shown in Budget 2013 that it is committed to meeting that challenge and is determined that through good government it will lead Ireland back to independent funding and back to sustainable growth in living standards and in employment. This allows me, on behalf of the Minister for Social Protection, Joan Burton, now to turn to the core of the motion before the House. I welcome this opportunity to open the debate on behalf of my colleague, as I said, Minister for Social Protection, who has provided considerable and consistent support for carers. Although carers can sometimes feel, and it's well acknowledged, and the carers strategy, I think, was part of that acknowledgement, that their work goes unnoticed by the state, their communities or even their families, the importance and valuable role played by carers in society has been increasingly recognised both at EU level and in Ireland in recent years. Caring for another person can have a huge impact on carers and their families, and this is particularly true when that care is provided on a full-time basis. Becoming a carer can be a very rewarding experience, but it often means that people make huge sacrifices, particularly in relation to employment opportunities, and sometimes these sacrifices are made at the expense of the carer's own health. As deputies will be aware, the development and publication of a national carer strategy was a key social policy commitment in the programme for government. The strategy, which was published in July, sets the strategic direction for future policies, services and supports provided by government departments and agencies for carers. Government believes that a formal recognition and acknowledgement of the value and contribution of carers is deserved, and to that extent both the Taoiseach and Taoiseach and myself launched a strategy. We know that there are positive and rewarding aspects of caring, and many carers will say that this care is a normal part of being family member and a responsibility that comes with being a parent, relative or friend. But we also know that some carers are providing a significant level of care on an ongoing basis that is intensive and physically and emotionally draining. There are many reasons why carers do what they do, despite the personal sacrifices that have to be made to be able to continue providing this care. Whatever the reasons and motivation, they are often quite personal and emotional. We know that many carers feel invisible and feel that their contributions are unrecognised. Our current budgetary challenges did not preclude the publication of a strategy as a sign of the value that the government places on carers and their contributions to loved ones on a daily basis. It's worth considering who we mean when we talk about carers. There are a variety of definitions of the word carer. Current definitions in Ireland stretch from that used in the census, which records people who provide regular unpaid personal help for a friend or family member with a long-term illness, health problem or disability. And there were 187,000 people according to Census 2011. To those used by the purposes for qualifying for a social welfare payment, which states that the carer must be providing full-time care and attention to a person in need of such care. There are about 53,000 full-time carers receiving care allowance. Whatever we call them and however we define them, the one thing that we all share is that at some stage in our lives, almost all of us will either provide care for another person or receive care. Each member of this House will have some family member involved in caring. The issues surrounding carers and family care in Ireland are relevant to each and every one of us and are crucial to Ireland as a nation, societally and economically. When someone becomes a carer, their circumstances can change dramatically and often suddenly, and they can find it difficult to cope financially. Often, the person in need of care was the main wage earner in the family, or the carer is elderly and relies on a pension or other state benefit. Becoming a carer can have implications for all aspects of a person's life, from taxation to transport, from social welfare payments to accessing health services. Reflecting this, services and supports for carers are delivered by a variety of government departments and bodies. Excuse me. The income supports that carers receive from the Department of Social Protection are amongst the highest rates in Europe. Carers allowance is the main social assistance payment which provides income support to people who are providing certain older people or people with a disability with full-time care and attention, and whose income falls below a certain limit. Persons who are in receipt of a carers allowance also receive the annual respite care grant, the household benefit package and the free travel pass. The carers allowance weekly payment was not affected in this budget. Carers benefit is a payment for people who have had social insurance contributions and who have recently left the workforce and are looking after someone in need of full-time care and attention. Recipients can get carers benefits for up to 2 years for each person being cared for. There are approximately 1,500 in receipt of carers benefit. The carers benefit weekly payment, again, was not affected in this budget. For a child requiring full-time care who is under the age of 16, a domiciliary care allowance of €309.50 per month may be paid to the parent or guardian. This payment is not means tested and is to provide for the additional costs involved in providing care and supervision that is substantially more than that normally needed by a child of the same age. The parents may also be in receipt of a carers allowance. The domiciliary care allowance has not been affected by this budget. In the majority of cases, people who are being cared for will be in receipt of a payment in their own right, for example, a state pension or a disability allowance, and will be entitled to have free travel pass. This includes anyone aged over 16 who qualifies for disability allowance. If it is a disabled child, they may also be receiving the domiciliary care allowance. The disability allowance has not been affected in this budget. People in receipt of a social welfare payment, other than carers' allowance or benefit, who are also providing someone with full-time care and attention, can retain their main welfare payments and receive half-rate carers' allowance. Similarly, people currently in receipt of a carers allowance who may have an underlying eligibility for another social welfare payment can transfer to that other payment and continue to receive up to a half-rate carers allowance. The half-rate carers allowance has not been affected in the budget. The income disregard, that means test for carers allowance, is the most generous in the social welfare system. A couple under 66 with 2 children earning a joint annual income of up to $35,400 can qualify for the maximum rate of carers allowance, and such a couple earning $59,300 will still qualify for the minimum rate. Carers are entitled to a half-rate carers allowance if they care for more than one person, and a respite grant for each care recipient. These provisions have not been affected in the budget. Deputies, which I'm of course most of the focus of the discussion in recent days has been on the respite grant. We have to remember that carers receive considerable supports. There are only about 5,000 carers who receive only the respite care grant, which is not a means-tested payment. The government had to make very difficult decisions in the course of Budget 2013 in order to protect core weekly payments, which people receive, such as pensions, disability payments, carers allowance. We had to look very carefully at the other additional payments, such as the respite care grant. Let's take, by way of example, a single parent with a disabled child in receipt of half-rate carers allowance. They would receive €319.80 per week in income support payment. One parent family payment of €188, an increase for a single child of €29.80, and a half-rate carers allowance of €102. From October to April each year, they will also receive the free fuel allowance of €20 per week, which also wasn't affected in the budget. They may also receive a €309.50 per month domiciliary care allowance for their child, and would be entitled to the respite care grant, free travel pass, household benefit packages. The total annual value of all income supports in this case in 2012 is €23,606. Chair, I'd just like to say that I personally don't like examples like that, but it is just one, and I'm sure there would be many more that everyone could give, and I fully accept that as well. The revised rate of the respite care grant of €1,375 will still be more than twice what it was in 2002, when it was €635, and higher than in 2006 at the height of the economic boom, when it was €1,200. The estimated expenditure on carers in the Department of Social Protection in 2012 is over €771 million. €509 million on carers allowance, €24 million on carers benefit, €135 million on respite care grant, and €103 million on domiciliary care allowance. This represents an increase of €20 million on expenditure of 2011. Carers also receive free travel pass at an annual cost of €6 million, and carers who reside with the care recipient are eligible for the household benefit package, and again this has an annual budget of €30 million. The government is committed to ensuring that in addition to the necessary income supports, carers receive a comprehensive range of services to assist in the caring role. Caring for a relative who has a disability, who is frail, or who is chronically or terminally ill not only requires a wide range of skills, it also requires patience and an ability to empathise at times when they may be feeling vulnerable, stressed and frustrated. I know that the role of carer, which while it may be rewarding, can be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that caring can exact a great cost, be it emotional, physical, financial. from the person providing that caring. I want to turn to services provided by the Department of Health and Health Service Executive. Protecting the vulnerable, including supporting people to remain at home and in their communities for as long as possible, is a priority of the Government. Maximising health service community-based supports remains to the fore of the Government health service agenda. This has to be balanced against addressing evolving services and resource pressure and the challenges facing the HSE in drawing up its service plan for 2013, and this challenge should not be underestimated. The overall provision of home support services is therefore regularly reviewed at national and local levels in the context of clients' need and resource availability. Notwithstanding the recently announced reductions for HSE home support provisions over the later part of 2012, investment in these services remains significant, with expenditure of approximately £320 million expected for home help and home care packages this year. Details in relation to home care provision for 2013 are being considered at present in the context of finalising the HSE service plan, which is